All right, good afternoon. Well, go ahead and get started. So let's generate altruistic motivation for our time. Generating these minds of confidence, refuge, bodhicitta, understanding the Buddha as an unmistaken guide, and therefore his teachings as infallible, reliable, dependable, repeatable in our own lives, in our own experience. And thinking that the result of that path is our complete awakening, which is something we strive for, not only for our own benefit, but principally because it allows us to be of benefit, fully developing the mind, freeing the mind from the adventitious stains of the afflictions, allows us to clear away even the subtle obscurations to omniscience, and eventually become exactly like the Buddha. Be of extraordinary benefit to countless sentient beings. All right. So today we'll finish the section on karma. We would start with day 206. Are there any questions from last class? Okay, so day 206. Day 206 was a little challenging in its presentation, in the sense that the quotation is intellectual understanding alone is not enough to stop the continuous experience of suffering and to continuously experience happiness. So, of course, that's true of any of the realizations in the Lamrim. We have to move beyond just an intellectual understanding of refuge, of karma, of the suffering of the lower realms, of suffering of the upper realms, of bodhicitta. All of these things, they have to be something that becomes part of our direct experience. What is challenging, of course, it's Buddhism and it's the Lamrim, so all of it is challenging. But he says there's a big difference between an intellectual understanding of karma and one based on the living experience of it. Some students have a word perfect understanding of the teachings on karma, and some superficial faith, meaning, well, it's written down in the sutras, it's being, presented by high lamas, and therefore, that's enough. That's sufficient. Um, but then he says, but because they do not have any experiential understanding, when their understanding is tested, they fail. They have no solution when serious problems arise. They are satisfied with being able to talk about karma as if being able to tell their parents and friends about it were enough, but they cannot do what they talk about because they haven't practiced. So, what seemed challenging about that, of course, is that karma, as we've said, is a deeply hidden phenomena. So, in some ways, there are legitimately aspects of karma that we don't have experience with, in a really deep experiential way, simply because we're not fully enlightened, which is a bit different than, let's say, impermanence. With impermanence or even death, um, or even guru devotion. There's many of these topics that don't really have a deeply hidden phenomenological aspect to them. Certainly with calm abiding, and of course they talk about the deepening ways that we gain realizations in dependence upon, like I say, fully qualified calm abiding and so on. Still, though, there will be ways of relating to the teaching on karma that, simply by virtue of not being enlightened, we have no access to. We can't see all of the details of karma. So, and really, up there comes a point, they do say that there comes a point when, again, sort of in dependence upon fully qualified calm abiding, a person can gain some recollection of past lives, not the sum total, but some additional recollection of some past lives, because their mind is able to achieve a level of depth that can track back the chain of mental events beyond the incredibly sharp state changes that happen from one life to another, which is ordinarily that incredibly sharp state change from life to bardo to life, kind of wipes out ordinary continuity of memory. But there is a continuity of memory that can be developed. And then it becomes, the confidence in karma becomes easier, because we have direct experience of past lives, not necessarily, but then we can infer, well, if there are past lives, there must be future lives. So we get some really deep experience, and we might be able to see some patterns, looking at those lives in a way that, and so that can still happen. That could even still happen in this life, if we develop fully qualified calm abiding, which is, relatively, compared to enlightenment, relatively easy. But it also seems like he's getting at, I can't say for sure, but getting at the ability in a way that maybe doesn't truly depend on these advanced states, where simply by guarding karma, in a really mindful way over a relatively long period of time, 5 years, 10 years, we can see some results of that. We can see how that, when we allow the mind to, without any effort to apply any antidotes, we allow the mind to just continually fall into anger and jealousy, and all of the afflicted states, how that sort of qualitatively affects the mind differently than when we are striving, when we are making effort to guard the three doors, the body, speech, and the mind, and the karmic actions that are arising through it. So but then he says, really this whole quotation is about, are we applying what we're learning as best we can, really, to whatever degree is possible? Are we guarding the karma that is arising? Are we trying to prevent negativities of body, speech, and mind? And are we comparing when we are trying that versus when we haven't tried that? And do we see that, in fact, the mind is responsive to that kind of training, that the mind, after not so much time, the mind starts to be a little bit more subdued, a little bit more internal, that we start to find that happiness and suffering arise from the content of the mind more so than the external circumstances. And so on this level, it seems like Lama Zopa is saying that we can arrive at insight into the operation of karma merely by, but crucially also by actually taking what we're learning intellectually and using it in daily life to watch the arising of affliction and to apply antidotes to affliction. And if we don't do that, if that there's a danger, they call that insensitivity. I don't know if there's other translations. That's what Kendall Magnuson calls it, insensitivity to Dharma, where we only stay on the intellectual level and we think, oh, that's good enough. We never ameliorate our behavior, and then we kind of develop this, and it's a historic, it's sort of like, it's like lung in a way. It's like this thing that they've noticed over 2,600 years, that we can develop this kind of a wrong relationship to the Dharma, where it's purely intellectual and it never is something that we integrate in our behavior, and that's a real danger. And Kendall calls it insensitivity to Dharma. Yes, Koda.
You're psychic. My conundrum this last several days, I'll use myself as the example. If I'm an insensitive person towards Dharma, and I'm very heady, and my actions are raw, rough, pushy, aggressive, really self-serving. Sorry, dogs. And someone calls me on my behavior, not in a mean way, just says that they are uncomfortable with how I act, or how I acted specifically to them, not in general, but very clearly, specifically to that person who is now giving me feedback, not angry feedback, but feedback. And if other people in our group, not this group, I mean, example group, in the group, feel the same way as that person does, but I'm insensitive, so I don't see my effect on others, does that one person have a paramita of morality, of ethical morality, do they, not that they're like the savior of the group or anything like that, but do they have a kind of moral or a, are they bound to try to not just ignore me being the big insensitive bull in the china shop? And they're not giving feedback to me for the group. They're giving feedback to me for them to be real for themselves. But is there, what's the word? Folks, help me out. Is there an
obligation?
Yes, or, and I don't mean an egotistical one, like, oh, I'm gonna, not like that, but is there, if that person giving me feedback has talked to 10 or 15 people in my group of 80, and those 10 or 15 people are all rolling their eyes when they say Kodo. Oh my God, her. Oh yeah. And they're just dismissing me because I'm very insensitive. I'm like not putting the connections in my heart, right? I'm like here and I'm not really working in here. That's my conundrum these days. So what's the Buddhist perspective on that? Should that person just stay out of anybody else's business because that person and I have our karma and that's all they should deal with? Thank you.
I mean, in general, the Buddhist view is that the most, that the instruction that is given individually to us in general is that the most productive use of our time is to ferret out our own afflictions, our own problems, because that person also has whatever every person has whatever every person has. It I think it can depend in a little bit in terms of like interpersonally, how well one person knows another person, how how kind of lovingly or where it's coming from, and in there, because a lot of times it's also that we just want to be more comfortable, and that's like why we're just like trying to control other people, because it just is easier for us and that makes us feel more comfortable, rather than trying to think, well, why does this make me uncomfortable, and how do I, because what about the next person, what about the 30 next people, what about 3 years from now, are you going to try to control every single person that for the rest of your life, or are you going to work on your mind so that none of those people, regardless, so that you can, of course, and of course it's, we're all ordinary people, and the easiest thing is to try to change the situation, try to make people conform to what is more comfortable for us, rather than, Shanti, that's the sort of Shanti Deva's, quotation about, it's easier to wear shoes than it is to pave the whole world in leather, and that's the other alternative, is, well, if people, many people are like this, and everyone who falls into that category annoys me in some way, for the next 30 years, I'm going to meet dozens of people that are like that. Am I going to approach that? Is it logical, reasonable, effective to think that I can make every single one of those people act in a different way that I'm more comfortable with? Or do I switch that thing off in my mind? And therefore, none of those people, regardless of what they're doing, are actually going to agitate me. Um, so, but, it's also, like I say, so that's the general sort of thing, but like with parents and, things like, like if someone loves someone and they're concerned, like with parents or with they might say, oh, well, maybe this is something that you're not seeing, and I want you to have an easy time. I want you to, and so they might, so, but it really has to come. So, I mean, really, it's none of our business, and we should, like you're saying, we should just keep our mouths shut and work on our own minds. But sometimes out of a really loving place where there's concern, but then, maybe you say something and then you just never bring it up again because you said something. And like it's not, and now it's just none of your, and it's not like you need it to be different. You're just saying, hey, I maybe think about this, and then I never need to say it or think about it ever again, because now you do know, and now it's over. Um, any other thoughts or questions? So day 107, it's kind of talking a bit about what Geshe has been teaching about, in a way, kind of about, sort of about emptiness, in a way. The quotation is, every minute of the day we are getting teachings on karma from everything we encounter. And then the explanation is going into looking at everything that we experience as a karmic projection, a mere karmic appearance. So it's not quite emptiness in that sense, but it's similar to that idea, um, in the sense that we are experiencing the same world as other people simultaneously, but is it really the same world, even on a just day-to-day basis? Like if we're in a really bad mood that day, or if we're in a really good mood that day, we're going to have a filter, that's going to change how we react to everyone that we talk to that day. And even like the way that the flowers look, and the way that the bird, some days the bird song is like joyful, and other days it's like, shut up, I'm sleeping, this is annoying me. Same thing, same experience, same time of day, same, noise, but our reactions are very different, based on, and that's kind of this idea of a karmic appearance. Well, if the mind is colored in a particular way at a particular time, then everything that we see is going to be tinted, through that particular way of perceiving. And that's always happening. It's not necessarily as dramatic as a great mood or a terrible mood, but it's also just our kind of baseline predisposition, too. And that's also sort of karmically, it's a karmic manifestation. Some people are naturally kind of often upbeat and positive, like Shayla. Some people are like me and kind of like, Eeyore in human form. Um, so there's different people are different. And so people experience the same thing in different ways, even in really stable, consistent ways. And and recognizing that, people are different, and we have these, even though, so we're not actually experiencing objective reality, we're experiencing it through it's a karmic appearance to the mind, that is happening in really changeable ways, and even stable ways, just based on our own karmic tendencies and habits and predispositions. Um, and then also thinking too, again, going back to the previous contemplations, where we understand that happiness, that positive experiences are the result of past positive actions, and negative experiences are the result of past negative actions, then also using our lives to remind us of that fact, which, is going to help us to stay, doing the right things, to stay focused on, well, yes, today I was able to eat this delicious meal, or I was able to see this beautiful sunset, or I was able to, connect with a good friend, in a meaningful way. And I really enjoyed that. That was really beneficial. And so if I want to have more experiences like that, that was not causeless. That wasn't random. That was a karmic manifestation of either, those examples were positive. So, if I want to get more of that, then I need to be sure that I'm creating the causes of more of that. And if something unpleasant happens, then we want to be like, okay, that's a wake up call so that I don't create more causes of suffering in future lives, and using that as a way of recognizing that these things that are happening, they're not random, they're not causeless, they are the ripenings of past karma. And so we either um, use that as a way of avoiding, continually avoiding the causes of future suffering, or we use that as a source of inspiration to, think how amazing it was that in previous lives I must have, you know, engaged in stainless prayer and cultivated, great love and great compassion. So I need to do that again. I can't just rely on the fact that that previously happened in this life. I also need to continue to make stainless prayers and to, try to overcome self-cherishing and attachment and develop genuine love and compassion and wisdom, so that in future lives, all of these positive things that I'm so enjoying will also continue to happen. Oh, and then there's Lama Yeshe's kind of famous quote, which was copied here, which I really, he says, think like this: for the rest of my life, it is my responsibility to grow in mindfulness and happiness. Each day I will expand the loving kindness I already have. When I wake up each morning, I will open my wisdom eye and see more and more deeply into the inner universal reality. I will try to be as mindful as possible. I will take responsibility for my life and dedicate it to others by growing strong in loving kindness and wisdom. I will serve others as much as possible. We should make we should make the determination that this is going to be our way of life. One of Lama Yeshe's, the things I like most about what he's written, they use that here, which is great. Oh, maybe I skipped ahead. I'm sorry. That was day 208. Sorry. I skipped ahead. Okay, so that was day 207. Any questions about day 207? So then day 208, that's where the quotation from Lama Yeshe is found. The the short quote is, "Be satisfied and rejoice in every little progress." Um, so it's a simple. There's not a lot of philosophical complexity. I mean, actually doing this is difficult, but there's not a lot of subtle, points. Maybe he's just saying here in day 208 that um, we should, it's kind of like the philosophy of marginal gains. If you look at any kind of business philosophy, or just kind of like incremental progress toward your goal, and just being satisfied with that. Just the way that I always think about it is, well, I'm alive again, today, and so I have today, and so I just use today in the best way that I can, and then purify any mistakes, that happened, and then hopefully I'll wake up again tomorrow, and then I get to do that again tomorrow, and then you just, if also kind of there was this one story, this one interview. I don't know why it's always stuck. It's completely mundane and silly, but they were saying they were was a like CEO of Bank of America, or saying, was talking about how they were designing their system, because they have this international banking system, and he was saying, well, we don't think about the fact that we process 10 billion transactions or whatever per year. He says we process one transaction, and how do we process that perfectly? How do we make no mistakes in processing one, and then we just do that 10 billion times over the course of the year? And I always really liked that kind of way of thinking about, because when we think about, the rest of our lives, and we think about, well, there's this realization, and there's that realization, and there's this, and there's these 42 meditations, and then there's tantra, and then there's, it's kind of like there's too many things. But if we can use today really wisely, really effectively, and make a little bit of progress, and then we just do that again tomorrow, and we just stay on track, and every single day, then it just sort of takes care of itself. Then you end up with a system that works really well. And then you just add to it, over time, with little, new pieces of information, and you just kind of refine your system in an incremental way over time. But you don't try to make these huge changes. You don't try to throw everything out and start again, or kind of just do something in a radically new way every couple. You just be satisfied with making small tweaks, here and there, and you just stay on track over the course of decades. And then there was that wonderful quotation that he ended with, one of my favorites. Any thoughts or questions? Welcome, Fernando.
I have to tell you about how I put this into my daily life. After my little brother died, I decided I was going to be a yes girl. And no matter what, if somebody says, hey, do you want to go do this? I had to say yes, unless it was like, heroin or prostitution. But so I had a friend who asked me to run a half marathon with her. And I said yes, which I don't know why, but because I had to. I hit the wall at the 7th mile and didn't think I was going to make it. And when I hit the 8th mile, I jumped up in the air and screamed, I am amazing. And then I got to the 9th and I was like, holy crap, that worked. I did it. And so I just kept doing it over and over again. And that just became my life's mantra. I'm amazing. And that shit works. Excuse the language, but that works. It's straight up. If you tell yourself that's the way it's going to be, it's legit. Okay, I'm finished.
Any other questions or reflections, thoughts about? I think we're done now. I think this is the last of the contemplations on karma. So anything from this module to think about?
I just want to ask, in which day are we on right now?
The day 208 is we just finished. Yeah, go down.
Well, it's all so profound. If I really take every action, everything that happens to me as my karma, that I've have an imprint from somewhere and a past relationship with every person that I'm encountering or passing by, even the quote strangers that I'm passing by, I've had some previous or thousands, millions of previous existences together in some form with. That I know it's a hidden, one of the hidden qualities, but it's just so profound. It's going to take me a while to really chew it up and swallow that. And that I can feel it already shifting me. If I really, really, really take that in, then there's no more blaming. It's my creation. And then I have a choice to either know when, if I have a negativity coming up, I know to zip it. Zip it, put my hands in my pocket and smile. That's it. And if there's something joyful and positive that's going to create more joy and positivity, then I can dance around with the flowers and the people. But it just really makes it quite simple in a way. I mean, that the work is not simple, but the confusion about why is this happening, blah, 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 all of that's gone. Totally gone. This is my stuff, my responsibility. Thank you. It's beautiful, very beautiful.
Anything else?
I think you're on a roll, Coda. I don't remember who said it, if it was Padmasambhava, but someone at that time in history made the comment that karma as the womb of emptiness or independent arising, and just the work, the kind of the beautiful work that it is that we're presented with all the time is, I mean, you're right, it's Coda, it's profound, but it's all, but there it is all the time. So we're always given the opportunity whenever we open our eyes or ears or keep our mouth shut.
I'm going to start a company with some gluing chapstick for Buddhists.
I'll buy a case.
All right. So I think we'll leave it there for today. The section that we have coming up is pretty similar to the material that was just covered in Samsara and Nirvana, the Discovering Buddhism course. And we'll have about the same amount of time, really to think about it. Maybe a little, I guess a little bit. Well, I mean, about the same in terms of number of hours and so on to look at the material. It's kind of, it's sort of the most intense maybe in a way, because it's mostly about really confronting suffering, and even the suffering of even the upper realms, the things that don't ordinarily seem like suffering, because we covered, so we've finished the small scope with the teachings on karma. We've covered the small scope of the Lamrim, and so we're going into the middle scope of the Lamrim, where the purpose is to develop renunciation of cyclic existence as a whole. With the small scope, we, in a way, develop renunciation really only of the worst kinds of experiences within cyclic existence, which is why the contemplations on the sufferings of the lower realms are in the small scope, which we covered, the hell realms, animal realm, preta realm. But on the small scope, we're not yet disenchanted with the concept of cyclic existence. There's still some, maybe hope that if we were to remain on the small scope, we might be able to retain some hope that we can actually make samsara work, that just good future rebirths is sufficient, and maybe that's what we can stick with. But the contemplations to come in the middle scope are meant to help create that disenchantment with cyclic existence as a whole. So even the kinds of disadvantages and painful experiences that arise in those good upper realm rebirths, those comparatively good upper realm rebirths, still are disadvantageous as compared to enlightenment for a Mahayana practitioner. So there's a lot of detailed contemplations on those, the 6 sufferings, the 8 sufferings, it's lots of, so it's a little bit intense in that way, really overcoming our tendency to see samsara as a pleasure grove, as they say, and to understand that we don't want to create the causes and the conditions of just more ordinary cyclic existence, that the only way that we want to engage in cyclic existence or with ordinary existence is to have the necessary conditions to transcend cyclic existence. So that's all going to be coming, and it's a lot of suffering is what we have to be thinking about for these. So in that way, it's a little bit intense for the mind. So that's what we will begin with. Day 209. We'll begin with that on Thursday. Yes, Shayla.
Ade has a comment.
Sorry. In the chat.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't see. Kodo says it's especially beneficial if one combines the understanding of karmic cause and effect with the understanding of things as are happening to a mere eye. Yeah, so of course joining all of, that's with regard to any of the ultimately, we have to join all of our realizations with an understanding of emptiness, even the the perfections on the bodhisattva grounds and paths don't become perfections until they're joined with realizing wisdom, realizing emptiness. So the perfection of even generosity and patience and so on ultimately will depend upon combining that with an understanding that the person experience or engaging in the act of generosity, and the recipient of the act of generosity are all empty of inherent existence. So there isn't any real generosity from its own side. It's a dependent arising and so on. But but yeah, in terms of karma, definitely using it, using as best we can, understanding that we don't, that we're not as solid as we think we are, is definitely a really supportive realization or way of thinking. Okay, so we will look at day 209 on Thursday. So we'll just end with dedication. So I bring to mind our positive motivation and think that having engaged in the class, we've actualized that motivation, created positive energy in the mind, and we want that positive energy to ripen in really beneficial ways that support our spiritual growth. So think about how you would like that to ripen. All right. Well, I will see everyone on Thursday for a courageous exploration of suffering.